Welcome to Speak Online. Today we are going to investigate the claims and framing of the USAID funding or abuse, depending on your perspective of this. So we will watch a clip first from Tim Pool. We'll go over two short articles, one biased to the right, the other one to the left, dig into what USAID is really funding, and then take a look at this White House press release that I found regarding this. And I think it will demonstrate what I'm wanting to communicate, that is who this PR meant to be received by. So please be sure to like, share, and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you are alerted when the next episode comes out. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and comments. Please check us out on Spotify, TikTok, and visit our website, tospeakonline.com. All right, let's watch and reflect. So, Tim Pool, my best buddy. Let's check out what he has to say, shall we? So, if you're just listening to this, you got Tim Pool on the left, and then he has an article up, breaking Supreme Court rules 5-4, Trump not allowed to block $2 billion in USAID payments. I also want to note the title of this video. SCOTUS rules Trump must pay $2 billion in USAID payments. They are stealing, in all caps, from taxpayers. Oh my God, Tim, what are we going to do?
The Supreme Court has blocked Donald Trump and DOJ's efforts to suspend USAID payments in a 5-4 ruling. They's basically saying $2 billion that we know to basically be going to, let's just call it colloquially, fraudulent programs. They're going to allow it.
Okay, so first, do you think this guy actually knows where the hell these things are going? I don't.
And the reason why I say colloquially fraudulent is I'm not outright saying in the legal sense people are defrauding the government. I am saying in the spirit and essence of the law, when we are supposed to be...
I'm not saying it. I'm just suggesting it.
...money for aid and development, and instead it's going to gender studies, I would call that a lie. But I draw the distinction because some of it probably is criminally fraudulent, but all of it is spiritually deceptive.
See how he says some of it probably is?
No one in this...
This is what this guy does, and this is how he panders to his audience as well. He portrays himself as this centrist, and he absolutely is not. Absolutely is not.
That is defending it, knew it was even going on. And those that do are deeply concerned about a major waste of money. Now, I can't say I'm surprised that we got a 5-4 ruling against Trump, because although the court is conservative, you still got Roberts, you still got Amy Coney Barrett, who are going to be like, but we'll see. Was it, in fact, Amy Coney Barrett who sided against Trump? I don't know for sure, but I do know that Alito, who is based, is fuming about this, as is Thomas, because, well, let's just say, can we, I'd like to do this. Can we take Thomas and Alito and clone them? I know Christians and conservatives may have more qualms of cloning, but trust me, having a Supreme Court that is just 9 in whatever combination of Alito and Thomas would be the best thing for this country. You must do it. All right, here's the news from Post Millennial. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel right now.
Don't do it.
Share the video if you do like the show.
For your own well-being. Don't do it.
The Supreme Court ruled 5-4 on Wednesday against the Trump administration and sided with a lower court judge's order for the government to pay around $2 billion to USAID contractors. The high court rejected the Department of Justice emergency application and sent it back down to the lower court for further proceedings. The one-page order stated that the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia issued a temporary restraining order on February 13th, blocking the Trump admin from enforcing directives that pause the distribution of foreign development AID funds. I don't want to call it aid. Stop doing that, postmillennial. On the 25th, the D.C. court ordered the Trump admin to issue payments, which were for work already completed before the issuance of the temporary restraining order. This amounted to around $2 billion. A deadline was issued for the Trump admin to comply as of 11:59 p.m. on February 26, hours before which the administration filed a request to intervene with the Supreme Court. The unsigned order states the application is denied. Let's pull it up right now. They say the dissenting judges were Alito, Thomas, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh. See, I called it. And then, of course, you had Roberts and Coney Barrett, of course, siding with the liberals. We have this tweet from Charlie Kirk who says, breaking, Supreme Court has ruled that Trump must unfreeze $1.9 billion in foreign USAID payments. Unbelievable. Alito blasts the majority, with Justices Thomas, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh joining in dissent. Well, I have the ruling here. And let's not waste any time with filler nor patter. They basically say on February 13th, the United States District Court for the District of Columbia entered in temporary restraining order, blah, blah, blah. Moving on. Justice Alito.
You know, all those details that actually make a difference.
With whom Justice Thomas, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh join dissenting. Does a single district court judge who likely lacks jurisdiction have the unchecked power to compel the government of the United States to pay out and probably lose forever $2 billion taxpayer dollars? The answer to that question should be an emphatic no. But a majority of this court apparently thinks otherwise. I am stunned. Guys, Alito's the best. Well, actually, I think Thomas is the best. But shout out to the rest. Kavanaugh sided against my views on guns. I'll let it slide. He's okay. But Gorsuch has been all right. Thomas and Alito, though, they are based. In capsule form, this is what happened. Respondents are a group of American business and nonprofits that receive foreign assistance funds from the State Department and USAID. They brought suit and claimed that the current administration's temporary pause of foreign assistance payments is unlawful. On February 13th, 2025, the district court issued a restraining order, temporary, requiring the government to halt its funding pause. It based that decision on a finding that respondents are likely to succeed in showing the government violated the Administrative Procedure Act, APA. After issuing the TRO, the district judge grew frustrated with the pace at which funds were being dispersed. And on the 25th of February, he issued a second order requiring the government to pay out approximately $2 billion. The judge brushed aside the government's argument that sovereign immunity barred this enforcement order, and he took two steps that, unless corrected, would prevent any higher court from reviewing and possibly stopping the payments. First, he labeled the order as non-appealable TRO, and second, he demanded the money be paid within 36 hours. This left the government little time to try to obtain some review of what it regarded as a lawless order. The government moved for a stay pending appeal in the district court, but the judge shrugged off the government's sovereign immunity argument and ignored the government's representation that most of the money in question, once dispersed, could probably not be recovered. The government quickly filed an appeal to the United States Court of Appeals, but with only 4 hours to spare before the payment deadline, the D.C. Circuit dismissed the government's appeal because it took the district court's TRO label at face value and determined it lacked appellate jurisdiction. With nowhere else to turn and the deadline fast approaching, the government asked the court to intervene. At the last moment, the Chief Justice issued an administrative stay. Unfortunately, a majority has now undone this stay. As a result, the government must apparently pay the $2 billion post haste, not because the law requires it, but simply because a district judge so ordered. As the nation's highest court, we have a duty to ensure that the power entrusted to federal judges by the Constitution is not abused. Today, the court fails to carry out that responsibility. I'm going to take a page out of the Democrats' books. Democrats said they should just ignore the Supreme Court. Well, that's a bold play, Democrats. Do you think in this instance Trump should do the same thing? I'll take it from you guys when you said just defy the Supreme Court. Maybe Trump should. Here's the question. What if the Trump administration said we won't do it? What then? We call that a constitutional crisis. There's no real definitive what a constitutional crisis is, but the Supreme Court says do it and they lack the enforcement capabilities. The issue then becomes, who are they instructing to do and what are they instructing them to do? So the payments has to go out. Who does it? What if Trump right now says to the individual who is responsible for pressing enter, you're fired, go home? The Supreme Court would be issuing an order to no one. They'd say all right, that's enough of that, fool. So here's some notes taken on that. Check this out. All right. So one, regarding this Tim Pool podcast, you notice how this guy, he leans to the right and makes comments of suggestion. This is very important. Very important. It kind of displays a certain type of pandering. The USAID, you see how he frames it, but then claims it's as abuse? There's always these little hedges in his method of communication. You know why? So he can
backtrack and be like, oh, well, I didn't exactly say that. I didn't exactly mean that. And it's because this guy does absolutely no research or prep. He's a cherry picker. We see him picking out these outline events, right? These one or two things which seem unreasonable for funding, but it doesn't go over the other billions that are helping so many others. He mentioned the administrative process, or actually the document that he read went over the administrative process, but he doesn't go over it. He never listed what this aid was for. And here's a big one. Moral equivalence arguments. Well, the Democrats did it then, the Republicans did it then, and this goes on both sides. When you hear that moral equivalence argument, it means that they are excusing bad behavior. We're not talking about then. We're talking about now. Does it make it okay to shoot someone in the past? And now it's okay to shoot someone right now? It doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't apply to arguments at all. That is a common thing that people do, and it's extremely annoying, extremely annoying. Going back, I want to make one note about him not explaining what this stuff was for. There is another individual online. His name is Sam Cedar. Whether you agree with his politics or not, one thing that he does push is media literacy, which is really important. And he's really made some good points about explaining how these things affect you. We may not consider this foreign aid as affecting us, but there's a long game here, right? There is a political agenda. You go bomb a country. Well, if you give them a little money, let's say to help out kids, education, they might not hold a grudge. Moving forward to a very biased article. Here is one. Let me get this zoomed in here so you can see it. Perfect. So this is from Wonket. Supreme Court will make King Trump pay USAID's bills for now, and Alito is mad. So this sounds, if I recall, this is the one on the left. And this is from, or written by, Marcy Jones. Now, why is this important to mention or look at these articles? You have people online posing as journalists, okay? You do a search to look up an article expecting good information. And what do you get? You get opinion. It doesn't just come in YouTube videos or podcasts. It comes in opinion. And that is to target a specific audience and pander to them. It's a big thing. It's a really big thing. Let's get started. The good news. The Supreme Court has stepped in to force the State Department to disperse $2 billion in USAID funds for work that has already been done. In the case of those assholes versus the AIDS Vaccine Advocacy Coalition and the Global Health Council. I don't know if that's true. There's no link to that, so I'm guessing it's not, but I give her props for being creative. Those assholes. Good stuff. The bad news. A ruling that should have been an obvious 9-0 was 5-4, with Alito, Thomas, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh dissenting, and Samuel Alito wrote an 8-page screed insisting that Donald Trump is so too, in all caps, sovereign, immune, as you might expect. This is not to be confused with the other USAID lawsuit filed by unions representing federal employees and members of the Foreign Service, which challenged Trump's right to dismantle entire departments that Congress has made. That injunction was denied. Today's case was pay the money you owe for the work you already got, mother effers. Doesn't sound biased at all, right? At all. It is entertaining though. You will recall USAID was the first thing Elon Musk, incel clown posse Doge, threw into the wood chipper after Trump issued an executive order putting a 90-day pause on foreign development assistance. So notice the language here, right? It's extreme. It's meant to be entertaining. And it is to some degree if this side is your thing. But let's say this goes viral and people start reading this. How is this frame going to affect others' behaviors and then therefore how they communicate? When they go up and talk to someone about this case, they're going to start putting on this tagline, Elon Musk incel clown posse. How's that going to work out to have a good conversation? Probably not. Doge or somebody blocked payments that caused immediate deaths, including a 4-year-old boy in Uganda, stranded workers overseas with no way to get back home, left 500,000 tons of food to spoil and effed over American farmers in the process. Eureka. All caps. On January 28, Secretary of State Marco Rubio issued a waiver for humanitarian assistance, but the money remained frozen anyway, and the administration froze 5,800 projects financed by USAID, even the ones that got a little Marco waiver. Then, gosh, he has to hate that, has to hate it. Then Rubio, and what's great is he got that from his employer. Jeez. Then Rubio fired Nicholas Enrich, the acting assistant administrator for global health at USAID, for blowing the whistle on the massive amount of disease and death that cutting the funding will cause and the chaotic contradictory instructions that employees had gotten for filing waivers. He also fired the USAID Inspector General, Paul Martin, for having the audacity to warn the government that USAID had lost almost all ability to track $8.2 billion in unspent humanitarian aid, leaving the money vulnerable to being co-opted by whoever might gain access now that no one was there guarding the henhouse. Okay, I think that's enough to get my point across. Now, let's take a look at one article on the right. Okay. This one is titled Supreme Court Issues Ruling on Trump's Order Against USAID Funding. Now notice it doesn't say King Trump. This is by Cole Harrison. Supreme Court issues ruling on Trump's order against USAID funding. Washington swamp creatures. So that's a big one. Okay, like that is a common thing. You get these talking points that are consistent. And then you have conversations with people and these talking points come up. I recommend asking people, who is this Washington swamp creature? Can you tell me who? And it will usually be returned as, oh, it's them. It's they, with a short description, but not a specific case. It's just this ominous thing that's out there. That's going to get you, promise. And they're screwing you over every day. So Washington swamp creatures are fighting tooth and nail to keep their gravy train rolling. For decades, bureaucrats have funneled billions of American tax dollars overseas with virtually zero accountability. That is a lie. And I'll demonstrate that. And you also heard that on Tim Pool's side as well. People have no idea about this. They can't get this information. Well, with about 30 seconds of investigation, that's all it took for me to find out that that was false. When anyone dares question where all the money goes, the establishment circles the wagons faster than politicians at a fundraising dinner. President Trump promised to drain this swamp and put America first. There's another one, right? Drain this swamp. But the entrenched interests in DC have powerful allies in unexpected places. The same unelected officials who cheered endless spending under previous administrations are now clutching their pearls at the thought of their global slush funds facing actual scrutiny. That's a big one. We hear this slush fund, and this is usually tagged on with, it's fraud, waste, and abuse. but all that we get are these cherry-picked examples of things that people might not agree with, but may actually be something positive. But, it doesn't match their agenda. So I see there's quite a few people on TikTok. Thank you very much for watching. Will you please like, share, and subscribe to the channel? I really appreciate all those working and watching. Okay, now let me read a little bit more here. So here's his take when it comes to the Supreme Court. In a shocking betrayal of fiscal responsibility, the Supreme Court has rejected the Trump administration's request to keep billions in foreign aid frozen. Now, why was it done? Their claim was, and that's the Supreme Court, is that it didn't follow the correct procedures, which is an important comment to make because it's not legal if it's not. Then, of course, there's a quote from Fox News. Justice Alito didn't mince words in his blistering dissent. Does a single district court judge who likely lacks jurisdiction have the unchecked power to compel the government of the United States to pay out and probably lose forever $2 billion taxpayer dollars? So I want to make a comment about this. To probably lose forever. Many of these grants that go out, okay? Yes, you are losing that money. It's a cost, it's an expenditure, but the idea is that we get a return from it. So let's say these, and this isn't including necessarily USAID, but it goes back to this frame of waste, abuse, and fraud. Let's say we have some money going to cancer research. Let's say we put in $30 billion. If we cure cancer, think about the return on that. The amount of taxpayer dollars that will be saved from healthcare expenses. I don't even know if you could put a number on it. It would be amazing. But it's a very good example of investment. Okay, let's get into some good information. So a little bit of summary on that. The talking points. Again, the lack of description, a them and they. You will commonly hear that type of frame on the right. This anti-authoritarian theme is a big one. It very much plays to that audience a great deal. And I think just one more comment on that, and this goes on both sides, is there are certain things that we are like naturally prone to want, like these anti-authoritarian types of things. This them and they, it's a natural thing. I get it, especially the anti-authority thing. Okay. So what do we got here? We got a web page called foreignassistant.gov. And this is an appropriation of funds, and it shows where this money is going. And just so you believe me, there's in the top left-hand corner, the USAID little link right there. And on the right-hand side, what it shows is a sector. So international, you can select the different areas, whether it's in the US or international. And then down below that is another one. And it says managing agency. And this is the agency which actually obligates and disperses the US foreign assistance, either directly or via an implementing partner entity. So a third party. The implementing agency for a foreign assistance activity may or may not differ from the appropriated funding agency. So what we're going to do right here, and you can click on the different ones, for example, USAID, Department of State, Department of Defense, Department of the Treasury, etc., etc. So we are going to click on U.S. Agency for International Development. And this then shows you up above how much money there is, the obligations, the activities, and the country and regions for which it is going. Now, I am picking the fiscal year of 2023, and you can pick all the other ones. Let's see, down to 2001. The reason I'm doing that is because when I looked at 2024 and 2025, all of the information hasn't gotten back yet. It takes time, right? And then to the right of that, another drop-down menu where it says funding phase. So you got president's budget requests, appropriated and planned obligations, and disbursements. So I want to look at, we'll do disbursements. Go back down, click on USAID. Perfect. So here we got the disbursements for this. The obligations are 44 billion. The activities are 7.4 thousand. Countries and regions where the money is going to is 160 country or regions. So these are all going outside of the US. So primarily this is going to Europe and Eurasia. The second, Sub-Saharan Africa, Middle East, and North Africa. I would say that's about, gives you an idea. Now here's a good one. Below all this, it lists what the activity is under activity ID. I'll read the description. Activities: any assistance project, program, cash transfer, delivery of goods, training course, research project, debt relief operation, or contribution to an international organization. So we got the activity, the international sector, the country, then the managing agency, which is USAID. We can see all that. And then you can see where the money's coming from the funding agency. So we'll take a big one here. Here is one for 14,400,000. Again, it's from USAID. The funding agency is U.S. Agency for International Development. The international sector is government and civil society. Macroeconomic support. So if you click on one of these links, it gives you a summary, and then it provides supporting documents. The description: Additional Ukraine Supplemental Appropriations Act 2022 to support macroeconomic assistance for the government of Ukraine. It gives detailed information on the implementing partner, country, funding agency, region, managing agency, international sector, so on and so forth. The main point about this information is all public, okay? It is a complete and utter lie. If you ever hear the words, and there's plenty out there, the public has no idea that this was hidden away, that they discovered this. You can discover this on your own in about 30 seconds with a Google search. This stuff is not hidden, and it's complete BS no matter where you hear it. It's a lie. It's a straight up lie. But Tim Pool, for example, doesn't have 30 seconds to go look it up. Here's another one. This is probably one that we hear a lot. So this one is for 811,450,000. And this is the contribution to the global fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria. GATM. The summary for this, and this is one I expect would be canceled, because they'll say it's not a responsibility to do this, blah, blah, blah. The description of it: founded in 2002, the Global Fund is a partnership between government, civil society, the private sector, and people affected by the diseases. The Global Fund raises and invests nearly US $4 billion a year to support programs run by local experts in more than 140 countries. We operate with three core principles: partnership, country ownership, and performance-based funding. All partners need to take part in decision-making. People actually implementing grants know the best way to fight disease in their country and come up with the most effective solutions. Funding should be provided where it can achieve the best results. By challenging barriers and embracing innovative approaches, we strive for maximum impact. So let's say what benefits would come from that. One, we are a very affluent country, and that money and those types of aids goes to people who, one, can't afford it, to those less fortunate. Now, yes, is it our tax dollars? But isn't that also a good thing? Something that we should support? That is a very small amount. I know it sounds like a lot, but a very small amount when you look at, let's say, the budgets for the DOD, okay, or going to our military. And in a way, you could make an argument that when you send people over there, and this has an American flag plastered on the box, and every single needle, whatever, comes with an American flag and an individual who represents our country doing good things. Well, those people, especially kids, which I imagine a lot of this is going to kids, will remember that. It is, for lack of a better term, it's branding with that American flag, and it shows something that we should represent, helping others. Let's see, cash transfer to government of Jordan, emergency food assistance to Ukraine. This international sector, that's emergency response. So that's going to people. That is probably one of the things that we recently heard was canceled, or probably something associated to it. That was $395 million. So right there, that is going to people who are in a war that is in many ways battling a proxy war for the US. Right? So we already have a tactical and political investment in it to give these people money to keep an enemy at bay. So this USAID is going to things that are important. This Title II emergency program, that's an emergency response. What is that? It's an emergency program through a partner of the U.S. Agency for International Development. This is for the Department of Agriculture. 2021 strategy, emergency response, emergency humanitarian assistance in Somalia, country who doesn't have anything and definitely could use humanitarian food and nutrition assistance. I wonder if that was one of the things that got canceled and was all the source of that waste. Another one, emergency food assistance, Afghanistan, global health security and development. So these are good things, things that I think most people, if they read, would be very much in support of. I really do. I think if you sat down with most of these people who are receiving this biased information, whether they accept it or not, would be like, you know what? That's not a bad thing. That is a good thing, a very good thing, something that we should represent and support. At least I think so. I think a lot of people signed up for something that they did not expect. And I think it is an important thing to show what these things actually are and that you can actually go and get this information, that it's not hidden. It's not fraud, waste, or abuse. And mind you, on that note, all of this stuff was passed by someone who represents the people. And there are proper channels to actually stop this, where you can bring these things up to Congress and say, hey, we shouldn't support this. Let's cut the funding. But it sounds better to say, hey, this is waste and abuse. I'm a badass, so I'm going to sign an executive order and knock that hell out. Prints a lot of good articles that represent what, in this case, President Trump is trying to portray to the voting base that he has. Now, I want to read a little thing from factcheck.org. How are we doing on time? 38 minutes. So, sorting out the facts and waste and abuse at USAID. One thing on the fact check, a lot of times you'll hear, hey, this is a biased place, blah, blah, blah. Well, that doesn't make it not a fact, right? Or just because you don't like the information one or the other way, or it goes against your opinion, doesn't make it not true. I think that's really important on both sides to hear. So, sorting out the facts on waste and abuse at USAID. What do we got here? what are some of the main ones? I want a specific example because these examples are what we're going to hear about in the news, okay? Here's one. A transgender opera in Colombia. One more note. Sorry, I'll get back to it in a second. But you will notice a lot of things regarding this transgender issue that are being claimed. The reason why is because, again, it is pandering to the audience, his voting base, because he's pushing an agenda and he needs a justification to accomplish what he wants. Don't focus on all these good things. Focus on these transgender issues. It's an excuse and a justification of behavior. So, a transgender opera in Colombia. On April 28, 2022, the University of the Andes in Bogotá, Colombia, put on a performance of the opera, quote unquote, as one. The show, which was written in the US and debuted in 2014, features a transgender protagonist. A program for the university's production of the opera said the show had the support of the university and the Philharmonic Orchestra, great orchestra, and the Small Grants Program of the Embassy of the United States in Colombia. The Department of State committed $25,000 to fund the project, and the website, USAspending.gov, also noted there was $22,020 of non-federal funding for the project, making a total of $47,000 listed on the site. The federal funding for this project also came from the State Department, not USAID. So, again, the big point with that is it's a false claim that this funding shouldn't be used as a justification to cut other programs. Here's another one. A transgender comic book in Peru. In 2021, the U.S. Embassy in Peru introduced a comic book called The Power of Education, which it used to promote education and exchange programs in the U.S. The following year, the embassy commissioned a second volume. The embassy asked us to introduce a gay student in number 2, show his personal struggle coming out to his parents, but that has zero to do with being transgender. David Compiti, who owns the company that produced the comic book, told us in an email. The comics were about scholarships and furthering education. The series ended up including 3 comic books, each one showing an aspect of cultural exchange and education. View them here, here, and here. The second one is what was highlighted by the Trump administration as a transgender comic book, but Volume 2 of The Power of Education does not include a transgender character. Rather, as Compiti said, it features a hero who was gay. The writer of the comic, David Lawrence, said the same thing in a post on his Facebook page on February 4th, explaining why the embassy had requested an LGBTQ character. The U.S. Embassy in Peru requested that as a small response to anti-gay prejudice in the country, he wrote. Okay. And it goes on. What could be good about this funding? Now, depending on your politics, you may not be supporting progressive social change. And I get that, and that's your agenda. But whether you're against it or not, should we not promote social acceptance of the other, of the minority? And you'll notice another theme about here is that this is supporting minorities, and those who are against it don't support the minority. I think that is a big thing to communicate, that many of these people that we are giving this money to are the disenfranchised. And in this case, these are people who are seeking social acceptance. And one of the reasons to do that is to decrease the amount of hate crimes and increase social acceptance. So I think that's an important thing, an important positive that isn't often put out there. But if you have children, let's say, who are gay, or in the future you will have children who may be gay or transgender, this is something that's not going to go away, no matter how much you want it to. Wouldn't you rather have them live a life where they are not facing hate and discrimination from other people? Wouldn't it be better for a society to accept those people rather than reject them? I think we've all experienced rejection in our lives, and probably the majority of us, I would say, don't enjoy it. And much of that rejection then also promotes other bad behavior, often inflicted on oneself. Now, lastly, about this communication to whose audience, I made a comment, a White House PR statement. I'd like to read it, and then you can ask yourself who. So it's from the whitehouse.gov, and it's titled, "At USAID, Waste and Abuse," there's the tagline, right? There it is, "runs deep." Okay. For decades, the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, has been unaccountable to taxpayers as it funnels massive sums of money to the ridiculous and in many cases malicious pet projects of entrenched bureaucrats with next to no oversight. So first of all, unaccountable to taxpayers. I think that's been demonstrated as false because those who represented us, they approved it. And you can go and get this information freely. And if you're a voter and a citizen, you can write to those who represent you and say, hey, we don't want this. And then this comment, and in many cases, malicious. That is something. Here are only a few examples of the waste and abuse. $1.5 million to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in Serbia's workplaces and business communities. $70,000 for production of a DEI musical in Ireland. Just heard about that. $2.5 million for electric vehicles for Vietnam. $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia. $32,000 for a transgender comic book. So we just read about this stuff. $2 million for sex changes and LGBT activism in Guatemala. $6 million to fund tourism in Egypt. Hundreds of thousands of dollars for a nonprofit linked to designated terrorist organizations. Even after an inspector general launched an investigation, millions to Eco Health Alliance, which was involved in research at the Wuhan lab, Why do you think in research at the Wuhan lab was tacked onto that sentence? I think you know. Hundreds of thousands of meals that went to Al-Qaeda affiliated fighters in Syria, funding to print personalized contraceptive birth control devices in developing countries, hundreds of millions of dollars to fund irrigation canals, farming equipment, and even fertilizer used to support the unprecedented poppy cultivation and heroin production in Afghanistan, benefiting the Taliban. The list literally goes on, and it has all been happening for decades. Under President Trump, the waste, fraud, and abuse ends now. So, let's see how many bullet points we got there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's 12. How come you didn't list the rest? You definitely got time to do it. Probably written by an intern. But ask yourself why. It's because if you include the rest of the ones, you can't justify it with your base. The base wants to hear about transgender, and they want to hear about diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's what they want cut. So that's the examples that they'll use because there's an agenda. It's all about the agenda and who the audience is, right? Because you want that support. You don't want to lose it. You want your party to continue to progress forward and push the agendas. And you can only do that with your base continued support. So I think we got a good example. Oh, and one more thing on that. You notice the language, the similarities, right? These taglines. I guarantee that an argument can be made of how all of those bullet points listed, which we did with some of them, brings back something helpful to the public, either in our own or other countries, to their minority groups as well. And I think that is one of the key themes to communicate, because a lot of this is complete BS and it doesn't take long to figure it out. It really doesn't. It probably took me 45 minutes. But anyway, to conclude everything, I think we got some good examples of general media bias in the public and methods used to communicate to specific audiences and why, and different things to pick up on when reading information to know why we be making a choice to read it because of our own biases, and possibly things to look at to determine whether it's good information or not. Some red flags, so to say. All right. Holy crap. Thank you, everybody, for the 3,000 likes on TikTok. You are amazing. That is amazing. She likes dragonflies. Hey, what's up, dude? I need to get better at interacting with the audience. I'm sorry. I really do. I get focused on what I'm doing, but you know, it's what I do, I guess, but I'll get better with practice. It takes time to learn to do this and also get good at it. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And again, please like, share, and subscribe. And TikTok, you're badass, guys. That's amazing. I really appreciate all the support. I really do. I really do. So thank you again. I got a ton of shorts to make and get up on TikTok on this stuff, which I will try my best to do. Had to get more things set up. I'm going to be bringing in some like cool audio and video stuff for the segments to introduce to make it look more professional. Hopefully that everybody likes. Thanks, everybody. You're awesome. And thanks again, TikTok.